Welcome to Dairy Robot Radio, the show that provides answers to your most pressing questions about dairy farming and automation. Each episode will focus on a major topic within the dairy industry and will feature experts throughout our industry and within Lely to help provide information and different perspectives on automation. And now, here's your host, Balana Putz.
Hey everybody, this is Balana Putz at Lely North America, and I get the pleasure of leading marketing for our North American marketplace, the United States and Canada. And today our guest is Dan Schreiner. Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you lead here at Lely.
Thanks for having me on, Balana. So yes, my name is Dan Schreiner. I'm the product manager for the feeding and barn products for Lely North America. And my role is to look at innovation, our current product portfolio, and how we can really bring automation to producers in North America for feeding and barn products.
So Dairy Robot Radio aims to deliver information to build a community and educate our dairy industry about the differences that we have here at Lely. One of our differences is automated feeding. So high level, big picture, what does that mean?
Automation is occurring more and more every day. And on the feeding side of the dairy industry, we want to look at ways to take out those mundane tasks that people do every day, but then also add consistency, efficiency, and an increased level of management to those dairy farms. And the Lely solution to that is the Lely Vector automated feeding system. What it does in simplest terms is it drives around the barn and pushes up the feed for the cows. It also is constantly monitoring how much feed is out for the cows, and when cows need feed, it drives back into its what we call the kitchen, and it mixes up the feed specifically for that group and then goes out and delivers it, and just does that all day long, taking that part of the labor out of the equation to make it more consistent and a steady source of fresh feed for those animals 24/7.
So what type of feeds will it accept and live in the kitchen?
The Vector can handle basically as many different types of feeds as you could imagine. We have a number of different ways to load the mixing feeding robot with the inside the kitchen, whether that's with the a grabber crane type system, commodity box, augers, you name it, we can most likely hook it onto the system.
If I have a tower silo on a farm, can it work as my kitchen? Can it work with the Vector?
Yes, it can. So we control the tower silo. We work with a third-party external controller box that would partner with our tower silo companies that we would send the information to that box, and that controls the tower silos. And yeah, we can load directly from the tower silos onto a conveyor and into the unit.
So we recently had a Vector tour. Where was it? What was it all about? Why did we have one?
So we had a Vector tour in Minnesota and Wisconsin just a couple weeks ago. We toured 5 different farms between the 2 states over a 2-day period. And the goal was to show people and introduce them to various different setups for the Vector system, get to see it work on the farm, get to talk to producers that are currently using the Vector system, and to see, give them ideas of how they could apply that to their own operation. A great example is one that we had up in northern Minnesota that has the full feed kitchen with the crane system. Also has tower silos that he incorporates into that system during the summer months, and augers for commodities as well. So big variety of different ways to put in feed ingredients into the unit. And then also has the ability to drive into the barn to feed the cows, and also to drive outside to feed the heifers in the barn that's adjacent to it as well. So, and that farm in particular has 2 mixing feeding robots, so they work in tandem with each other to feed even more cows than just one unit.
So how many rations does the mixing feeding robot produce every day?
In that particular farm, with the 2 robots feeding all of the animals, the dry cows, heifers, and milk cows, they're producing approximately about 30 to 35 mixes a day. So they're smaller mixes, but that There's a good reason for that, and that's so we can feed the cows somewhere between 6 and 8 times a day. That eliminates the variability that you have from the feed just sitting out all day and getting sorted through and drying out on the feed fence. They're given the exact same feed throughout the whole day, but it also allows the system to adjust for dry matter intake. So if the cows are eating more, it'll deliver more often. If they're not eating quite as much because of heat or something else like that, the cows won't eat it down, and then the Vector won't deliver that out as often. So it is a complete game changer as far as consistency. Cow's a ruminant, and the more consistent you can be with the rumen, the healthier the animal is, the more productive it is, and the Vector is really designed to benefit the cow that way, and also to benefit the farm from reducing labor, but also just keeping it consistent that they know every single day that it's going to be delivered the same way.
So Dan, talk to us about the differences with the Vector when it comes to the boss cows and the timid cows in the same pen.
So the cows are actually fairly smart animals. They figure out how the Vector works right away, and they know that unit is going to come back in a fairly short time period. Again, we try to aim for 6 to 8 times a day in a particular group to bring fresh feed. And so the competition at the bunk has been greatly reduced with the Vector feeding system, because those timid cows know that feed is fresh. They're not going to be standing there lined up waiting for a group of animals to finish eating. It's consistent throughout the day. So when you do see the Vector come out and feed, there's definitely going to be animals that come up and eat right away, but it's not that huge rush that you see when the cows are only going to get fresh feed once or twice a day. Generally, we want the cows to either lay down, eat, or get milked. And what we see with the Vector system and the milking robots is that our visits to the milking robot will actually go up as well. So they'll get up, they'll eat, feed, and then generally it'll be probably a little smaller meal than they would if it was just fed once or twice a day. And then a lot of them will go over to the robot to get milked as well too. So we do see visit activity go up with the milking robot.
Dan, we've got numerous different types of cows in terms of gestations and nutritional needs. So how does the farmer go about creating his mix?
So we have a data management system called T4C, or Time for Cows, that we train the farmer and consultants if they're working on the farm. You put all the rations that you would like in the program, and then also select what groups would get those particular rations. And so all that information gets fed into there. It also records all the information that comes back out of the Vector. So every single load that goes out, how much of each feed ingredient is placed in there, and then when it was delivered, who it was delivered to. If you have a milking robot, all that data is tied into there as well, and that's actually a lot of fun for people that like information, because you can tie in the milk production to the feeding, and if you make adjustments, you can really look on the fly the changes that it has on your herd. We have the ability to put in prices for the feed and for the milk, and we can get the cost of feed per 100 pounds of milk or 100 kgs of milk if you're in Canada. And it's a really great data management tool that really was not available in a conventional type system.
Let's talk about filling the kitchen. And, we're coming off a really long, hard, cold, ton of snow, whether it's in Ontario, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. I mean, you name it, east to west. We've had a lot of snow and tough winter conditions. How does the Vector perform in that scenario?
In most situations, the Vector is inside all the time, so you do load up the kitchen with the feed, which is also an advantage with our system, because when a snowstorm's coming, you can load up the kitchen, shut everything up, and then it's good to go through the storm. We do have units that drive out for every single load because the kitchen is not connected to the barn. And as far as the snow is concerned, it does a very great job of plowing snow out of the way itself. We do have to make sure that we manage any kind of ice buildup that could occur, so we need to keep that free, make sure that there's good traction for the unit. but it will operate 24/7. And we have units that have operated outside throughout the winter.
So that's the polar extreme of cold. Anything on the heat side of it in terms of benefits that cows, what can you tell us about the heat?
Yeah, so generally people believe that the cows eat twice a day, more often in the morning and more often in the evening, which is true for the most part. But when we do have high temperatures during the day, they will stop eating when it gets to a certain point in time. So the Vector itself, monitoring the dry matter intake, it's going to deliver feed out, and then when it's going to go back, push up the feed. If the cows aren't eating it, it's not going to feed it. But then when those temperatures cool down, what we're finding out is the cows start eating quite a bit more later on in the evening once those temperatures start dropping. And so in the summer months, we'll see the Vector a lot more active at night when it's cooler. So the animals will naturally change their behavior during the heat as well.
So do I need a lot of other equipment to go adjacent to my Vector? Meaning tractors, skid loaders. What's my trade-off in equipment?
In a conventional system, you're going to have the tractor that's hooked onto the TMR mixer, and then you're going to have some kind of a loader, whether that's a skid loader or a front-end loader, or maybe a tractor with a bucket to load it. So you're still going to need that with the Vector to load the kitchen. And the first comment that people have is, okay, well, I'm still loading the kitchen, so I'm not really saving any time. But generally what we find is that the farm saves about 2/3 of their labor from feeding. But the one thing that you're gaining is that you're loading the kitchen, and then the unit itself is mixing it up. So you know that actual ration that's going out to the cow is the one that you put into the system. So there's not variability depending on who's mixing up the feed that morning. Are they in a hurry to run off to a baseball game, or they just don't want to be outside because it's Christmas and time to open up presents? So it's going to be consistent, the same every day.
Okay, so we talked about equipment, and farmers are obviously dollars and cents kind of people. Dairy farmers want to know what this thing is going to cost, and we're not going to talk about that today because we always leave that at a local level with the Lely Center. But I think you can talk to us about return on investment calculators that Lely has created on the Vector to help producers do that comparison.
So we created a return on investment calculator for the Vector. We also have one for our Juno as well. But the Vector looks at basically a head-to-head from your conventional system to the Vector system, including all the equipment that goes in, fuel usage, electrical usage, labor, production, all of those numbers, your particular numbers for your operation. So we put all the information in, and then it gives you estimated return on investment. And there's a lot of variability from farm to farm depending on their particular situation, but we've seen returns on investment in that 3 to 5 year range, which is, for a normal piece of equipment, is a really great return on investment. There's a large upfront cost to automation. Obviously, you have to buy the equipment, but the labor savings, the fuel usage, a lot of farms are going to spend somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 a year on fuel for their tractor that's hooked onto the TMR mixer. That just goes away. The Vector operates in just a few dollars a day, $2 to $4 a day generally. It can vary from farm to farm as well too. So just the cost of operation itself is dramatically lower than before, and that's not even including production benefits that you might gain, and the reduction of feed waste from the fact that it's feeding on demand. So if the intake from the animals goes down, it doesn't feed as often, so we're not wasting all that feed. So we actually took our ROI calculator and looked at our current customers. So really took the real life data of, okay, it's nice to play scenarios, guessing games, and what could happen, but we actually have looked at current farms that have had the Vector system for more than a year, and what it tells us. And what we're finding out is actually we're being fairly conservative on a number of farms for what the return on investment can be. I mean, we have a number of farms that have been able to eliminate a tractor, eliminate a part-time employee, and also production is going to vary a lot depending on how good of a job you were doing before, how consistent of a job you were doing before. But the consistency and the performance of the unit allows you to have a feed system that's going to really be tuned into exactly what the cow's needs are, and production increases and component increases. While again, every farm varies on what we see. We've seen some really impressive numbers on farms across North America.
Let's talk about maintenance. What are the daily tasks? I mean, if I think of a tractor, farmers change their oil filters, change the oil on the tractor. There's, standard operating procedures that you do with equipment. So what is it that you got to do on a Vector?
The biggest thing with the Vector is to make sure that the kitchen is stocked with fresh feed every day. So looking to make sure that the corn silage, the haylage is there, that we're going to have enough feed to make it, could be a day, could be up to 3 days of feed. Other things with the robot, you just want to check the sensors, check the laser, make sure that it's clear of debris, check the ultrasound sensor to make sure that that's free. And really, besides that, there's not much to it. We do have routine maintenance schedule of checks every week, every month, and then service technicians come out twice a year to just do a full look over the unit. But it's fairly straightforward.
Do farmers have to be computer geniuses to have automated feeding?
One of the strengths that we have as Lely, as our farm management support team, we have a great group of individuals that work with the farmers at the Lely Center level, and then we also have farm management support people at the Lely North America level as well to support them. But they work very, very closely with the farmers, with the consultants of the farms to go through step by step how to use the program, how to get the most out of it, and really helps the farmers equip themselves better to take their operations to the next level. The team that we have out spread across North America and the trained farm management support consultants that we have out there know how to use the system and are there to help producers get the most out of their investment.
So what's different about a Vector as compared to a traditional feeding system?
From a visual standpoint, farmers are pretty surprised when they go and look at the feed fence that there's a lot less feed out there at any given time, and that's intentional. For one, again, to keep the feed fresh and be able to deliver that consistently throughout the day. But there's never going to be a point where the feed runs out, because as the Vector goes and pushes up the feed, when it drops below whatever amount that you set it as a producer, when it drops below that amount, it's going to go and deliver more feed. So it's just going to be a smaller amount, but very consistent throughout the day.
So let's go back to this thing called the kitchen. And you talk about a crane. And, some of us visually think of a big concrete crane or a big crane on a construction job. What is the crane, the Grapple? Tell us more about that.
From a visual perspective, it actually is more accurate to like a shipping yard crane that's moving large containers from the ground to the ship. So there's a grabber, so it looks like a claw and a claw machine that goes up and down, suspended off of a crane, a lattice girder that's suspended on I-beams. So it'll go across the whole kitchen in two directions. The width and the depth of the kitchen. So you just plot out into the program, and the local dealer Lely centers do this for you, where all your feed compartments are going to be, and then you just put feed in the compartment, tell the machine that feed is there, and then when it calls for that amount of feed, it'll drive over to that spot, measure to make sure that it's still there, and then go down and grab the required amount of feed to then dump into the mixing feeding robot.
Nice. So I'm visualizing the claw from the movie The Minions, the claw from the arcade, something like that.
Yes, that is pretty much what it is scaled up to feed the cows.
So for a person who's thinking about this, where do they get started? Who do they talk to? What's the first step?
The great first step, obviously you can go to Lely.com and check out the Vector there. There's a lot of videos of the Vector. There's both Lely videos and videos from producers on YouTube as well. And then on our webpage, there's videos, there's brochures, there's a lot of specifications about the Vector to get a really good idea of what it is. But then talking to the local Lely Center, which you can go online and look up where your local Lely Center is as well, and talk to them about the Vector and to see if there's one in the area and if they would be able to get on a tour in the future.
Okay, Dan, so let's talk about another difference on an automated farm, and that's the Juno feed pusher.
Lely is actually the pioneer in automation when it comes to feed pushing. So our first Juno came out in 2008. And we've had a couple renditions, but we're really happy to announce last year that we came out with the new Juno that has a lot of new features. But we've had a lot of experience being leaders in the industry for automation, and feed pushing is by far and away one of them that we've really taken the lead on. Feed pushing is one of those tasks that you look at the farm and everybody knows it's important to make sure that feed is accessible to the cows. But generally speaking, it's one of those when things get busy, it's easily missed, and it's definitely not done as often as what people would like to see it. So automating that process, allowing that unit to go and push up feed numerous times a day allows those cows to have access to feed that they just didn't have before.
So we're in a time right now where labor quantity and quality is tough to find, whether it be in Ontario, Canada, or Ohio. I mean, it's everywhere. So what is a labor savings? What's the difference with the Juno?
One of the things that is exciting to be a part of the Lely team is really our focus is on automation, and labor is such a huge part of it, especially going forward. Like you said, it gets harder to find good quality labor. And the Juno itself, it's one of those where farmers look at it and say, okay, well, it's not really saving that much labor because it only takes me a couple minutes to push up feed. But what a lot of people don't really think of is, okay, I'm in the middle of doing something. Maybe it's doing some field work. And so you're out in the field and you have to push up the feed. So what do you have to do? You have to not just push up the feed, but you have to get out from what you're doing, actually go to the barn, start up whatever unit that you're going to use to push up the feed, go push it up, and then go back to what you're doing before. So it really, could take 15 to 20 minutes each time. And if you're going to push up feed, 6 or 8 times a day, it really adds up. It's really easy to say, well, I'll just catch it the next time, or I'll do it a half hour later. But those cows then don't have as much access to the feed, and it does show production-wise as well. It's pretty well established in the industry that keeping feed pushed up on a regular basis benefits the cows.
So what's the newest, coolest feature of the Juno?
So there's a number of new features with our Juno, but the most exciting part of it is the ability to lift its skirt. On the the initial look at it, it's like, well, what do we need to do that for? But there's a lot of situations where it benefits to be able to just pick the skirt up and then put it back down later. So if you have crossovers that are dirty, if you want to drive outside, if there's a slope in the barn where there's a pretty steep transition, we can pick the skirt up and then drive over that area and then put it back down. We also have the ability with that to angle the skirt for a push on the left side or the right side, which means that we also have that ability to maybe once a day, twice a day, to actually clean the whole alleyway. So you can have the unit drive out down the middle of the alleyway, turn back around, push in the other direction, and then just slowly push that feed back to the feed fence where it's at. That no other feed pusher in the industry today has that ability. The feed pushers, there's a few different ones out on the market, but the Juno is the industry leader, and it's really exciting to be able to work with the product and see what it can do.
So from a planning standpoint, how do they know if they need 2 Junos or 12?
The local Lely Center can determine that, and some of that depends on what their goals are as a farm. If you want it pushed up 6 times a day, or if you want it pushed up 12 times a day, that will have a bit of an impact on, how far does it have to drive each time? Does it have enough time to do the number of runs that you want it to do? So that's the biggest determination of, do we need multiple units on a farm? The Juno is installed on farms down to a tie stall barn that has 40 or 50 cows in it, all the way to larger dairies that have, 1,000+ animals on it. So it's really flexible installation, flexible use across many different sizes of dairies. So we have a couple large installations where we have 10 and a few more units that are driving on one particular farm. Previously, that would have been almost equivalent to a full-time person driving around on a skid steer on a daily basis. So we do have that on a few different dairies across North America. The largest one worldwide is actually 19 units running on one dairy. That's in Asia. As far as larger dairies, it still comes down to labor and equipment cost, and the return on investment on a Juno, it really pays for itself in a very short time period.
For the technology guys out there, how does it work?
So it uses an ultrasound sensor to bounce off the headlocks or the wall or the rail to determine the distance that it needs to drive away from the feed fence. Also goes off of turns. Every once in a while, we put a piece of metal down on the floor just as a reset strip. But besides that, there's really no installation of sensors or magnets or anything else like that really makes the routing inflexible. We have the ability to with our handheld app that's fairly easy to use. Even I can use it. We can easily add another route and change the route on a regular basis with really very minimal change to any kind of installation. It's battery powered, so it does drive back to its charging station on its own, plugs in, and then gets itself ready for the next run.
As we look at this segment of our business, Dan, in barn and feed, the Vector and the Juno are our flagship products, and the Vector mixing feeding robot, the Juno feed pusher. What's the connection? We know producers don't need both of them, so do they graduate to one? What have you seen in the industry?
There's a lot of variation on the farms, but the Vector pushes up the feed just similar to the Juno. So if you have the Vector, you don't need the Juno, and so there are a number of our farms that have had the Juno already have a relationship with our Lely centers, and they had a Juno, and then when the Vector came out, they went for the automated feeding. We do have people that go right to the Vector on new installs, or they're renovating their barn and they want to take advantage and just go right to the Vector right away as they're building. But we do have a number of farms that start with the Juno and then do evolve to the Vector.
Hey Dan, thanks for coming down.
It was great to be here. Appreciate it.
So for everyone out there that wants to learn more about the Vector and the Juno, obviously go to our Lely.com, find your local Lely Center, or even better, talk to a farmer. Talk to one of the dairy producers out there in the field that has experience with the Juno or the Vector. Listen and ask them questions about their challenges and their successes with all of these products and the changes that they've seen on their dairies. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on Dairy Robot Radio.
You've been listening to Dairy Robot Radio, the show for dairy producers who want their questions answered by experts in dairy automation. Connect with us at dairyrobotradio.com to listen to all episodes and learn more about the topics and guests on the show. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.